Well, I want to wish all these mothers in our group happy Mother's Day. And just want to honor the contribution you've made to those lives that you've nurtured, through ups and downs, easy and hard times, I'm sure. Yeah, it's a great commitment, and it makes a world of difference. So thank you. Um, welcome people and light the God candle. It's a symbol of the one presence and power in the universe called by many names, and the name you choose to use is welcome. So today we'll share our beliefs. So our beliefs. Divine love is the source from which all of life flows. The direct experience of that ultimate source is available to all. All life is a unique expression of the divine to be revered. We co-create our world with the ultimate source and each other through consciousness. There is truth and wisdom in all spiritual paths. We choose the path of love. Thank you. And our opening song is There Is Only Love by Michael Gott. Thank you. Nice choice. I do. Not everyone gets the blessing of associating moms with love, but I certainly do. So, um, today we have the privilege of having Carol Becker speak with us, and her topic is mothers. What was the most valuable thing we got from them that helped us move forward as adults?
You
And
skipped the meditation.
Oh, I'm sorry. There is a meditation that will precede that. Got somebody keeping me on track here. And that'll be followed by Carol. And we're so honored to have Carol as part of our community with her training as a minister, and her service here on the spiritual leadership team, along with Laurel. We're really grateful that you're facilitating this for us today.
Well, Linda, I'm glad that you said that just before the meditation. It will give you a chance to think about those things during
Oh,
the meditation.
okay. Perfect.
Thank you.
So, Carol, take it away.
Okay. Well, so I hadn't really thought about this, today was my day until Eric sent me a heads up. And I said, oh my gosh, what am I going to talk about? And I thought of a whole bunch of things and worked on it a little bit. And then I said, wait, Mother's Day is soon. Is this Mother's Day Sunday? And yep, it was. And so I said, well, I've got my subject. Now I have to work with it. And it was fun because as you may have remembered from our times together here, you've heard stories about my mother and my aunt. And I know that from them, the good times and the bad times, the fun stuff and the not so fun stuff. I gathered very valuable wisdoms that took me forward. Took me forward as an adult, working in a male field. There was no crying, and my aunt gave me the ability to be stoic no matter the criticism. Thank you, Aunt Biddy. And my mother gave me rebellion and to be myself because she wasn't giving in to the abuse she experienced in her life. And there's another person that mothered me that wasn't my mother, and that was my Uncle Bill. And what he gave me was kindness. He was a supervisor in a mine, and when the mines went on strike, he always made sure his crew had food no matter what. That was just it. They would be fed. And so Uncle Bill was my kindness guru. So, but before devolving into this, I'd like us to consider that we may have chosen our parents. Some metaphysical philosophies say that we choose our parents before we're born. And I rather like that idea because then it makes sense to me about why I'm experiencing the things I am. And as one of my friends said, to find the gold in them. So perhaps you might select abusive parents so you can have empathy for people that were raised by abusive parents. Or you want to have the opportunity to develop empathy for abusive parents. Or perhaps to gain empathy for abused children because in a previous lifetime, you yourself was an abusive parent. So this choice thing, it encourages us to take responsibility for our life and to search for the positive things, the things that we chose to learn from whatever experiences we had. And so rather than feeling resentment or anger or assuming a victim identity, choice invites us to find the good and to take some accountability for what comes our way. And this meditation was perfect because we can reflect in meditation on those events and can lead us to a more forgiving and learning attitude toward the pain and disappointments that we all inevitably have encountered. What if we picked the parents not only for what we will learn or experience directly from them or through them, but because of all of the life experiences and lessons that followed from that particular point in the world? And so I invite you to reflect now. Remember your younger life, whatever it was, the good, the bad, the wondrous, the horrible. What wisdom you got from your mothers and those who mothered you. What bits of wisdom did you bring with you into your adulthood that were and are even so very, very valuable to you now? And I open it now for discussion. Thank you.
Well, I'll start. One of the ways my mom, who was definitely overwhelmed by having seven children, she was it was way too much for her, but she soldiered through. But she nurtured her family through her food. She um, loved to cook and she did a great job at it. And she always made sure that there were special things on special occasions. And she loved to bake. And so I think one of the things that I brought through with from her was my love of feeding people. I mean, whenever there's a big gathering for our family, I'm the one that makes the giant pots of stew or soup, or just to make sure everybody's fed and taken care of, because that was one way I was nurtured as a child. So it's definitely. And so my Christmas cookies every year to my boys is a little gift of motherly love that I pass on from my mom as well.
That is great. And I love being fed by you, by the way. And I love your general kindness that comes with that love. It's obvious that you brought that through too. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
For me, it was my mom was always a person of service, and through food too, but also through what she did to I don't know, to renovate the place that we lived in. She did serving in banquets and stuff like this. So she was always of service. And this brought me the realization that we are really all of service to one another in one way or another. It's not, we're not here for anything else but service to others. Uh, still respecting our own needs, but finally at the end being of service to others.
Well, and your mom had a super attention to detail
Mhm.
that was, and it was her attention to detail was about her caring for other people. She wanted to make things nice for everyone.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What a perfect couple you are.
Well, she's a better cook than I am.
Oh.
Well, when I was well, this came out before you got into your descriptions, what I came to mind was, things I was taught by my mom that carried me through that is accountability. That was the thing that really came to mind. And the other two qualities I think of with my mom, along with that, is steadfastness. And she also, let's see, I just think of her reaching out to help the people that were really having a tough time. She ended up with a master's in reading education for people with difficulties in reading. She took in a kid who, um, who had, I guess she got him out of jail early by her willingness to do that from an accidental shooting that had occurred. So, she cared about people and, put herself forward. She was an advocate, I guess I'd say. Yeah.
And we know that you are steadfast for sure. And I appreciate all the help you've given myself and Laurel taking on the spiritual leadership team. Thank you so much. Well, my mom grew up on a farm, and she married a man, and they were given a farm by his father as a wedding gift.
Wow.
But dad was a gambler and a drinker, and he spent a lot of time in town. So mom kind of ran the farm by herself, and she was very good at thinking of ideas and ways to fix things. And then she married a man who was a high voltage electrician following storms around the US. And she became the trailer camp mechanic, and you did not mess with her tools. And so I got a lot of that from her in my career as a person taking care of my own life and also as an engineer in my career. Cindy, you were going to say something?
My mom had, well, not a split personality, but a split sort of, her life was split up in different ways and kind of emotionally, psychologically. So up until I was about 6, my mom was just awesome. She was playful and colorful and creative. And with me and my 2 brothers, she took us on hikes and read to us, all snuggled up on the carpet in the living room while she read books. And she made things like she made this map of our town that she drew on this big piece of canvas. So my brothers mostly, but me too, we could drive our cars all around it. And the town was a small town in Alaska, so it was pretty easy. And she included all the points around the town. So that she was just great. And she was adventurous. My dad married her. She was a school teacher in Kansas City, and she married my dad and moved to this remote village in Alaska, learned how to shoot guns and hike around. And so she was just this awesome mom and person. And then somehow, who knows what triggers all these things, but something deep, some call it her demons or whatever, uh, surfaced in her, and my mom had to go away to a psychiatric hospital for deep depression and suicidal thoughts. And even to this day, it's like, what happened to her? So, but we all know spiritual, psychological trauma things that eventually get into our life. So, after that, it was a whole journey for years with trying to find the right meds. She became alcoholic, just all responses to whatever that was that happened. It would have been in her mid 30s. And what I learned from her, well, and then I guess the word would be overcomer or resilience. When she was 70, uh, she became clean and sober. She still took her meds that her doctors tried to figure out. She was diagnosed, of course, depressive, but also maybe some manic. And I just, I've watched her persevere and overcome and and love me the best she could. And so I know I got from her early on, I love fun and color and creativeness and silliness, especially with little kids, I'll make all my faces and noises and put on my funny hats and whatever. And I know that's from my mom. And then I've had my own struggle with depression and uh, I don't know, that deep kind of stuff. And I just think of her, how she persisted. And then she came to live with me the last year and a half after my dad went into memory care. And we had so much fun. We talked, I mean, I still, you know how you have questions like, oh, I should have asked her this. And um, so all that to say, I thank my mom for all her challenges and how she overcame and just stayed alive and and I guess that's a lot. That's about it.
That is a lot.
Wow.
And we know from studies that the first 6 to 7 years of a child's life is really important for building self-esteem and self-confidence. So you were able to keep that through everything
Yeah.
because of the life your mother gave you during that time. And I'm excited to watch you having fun when you go out and post stuff.
And what an incredible role model she was for you as well. With some of the struggles you have with your adult daughter,
Yeah.
she persevered, and so do you. And it was like you saw her shine, and you're shining as well. So sounds like she was a phenomenal role model for you.
And Laurel, I saw your hand go up there.
You're muted.
You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, this all rolls around every year, right? The Mother's Day reflection, I guess. Uh, my relationship with my mother was not what I wanted it to be. I always remember I wanted her to love me, and I knew she loved me, but I never felt like she liked me very much. And it was a problem because my actual biological dad, she had difficulties with him and they divorced. And so I always felt like I kind of carried that uh aura with me, I always kind of reminded her of a bad taste she kind of had in her mouth from that relationship. So as a child, I always, that's what I always wanted. And I always remember thinking, I wish she liked me. I wish, it seemed like she didn't want to have fun with me or like me, or she always, she wasn't negligent, I had all the things and, all the clothes and food and a home and all of that. She was, very devout and steadfast. I think somebody said steadfast. So she was, not about the physical neglect, but just the emotional was so lacking. And I went through most of my childhood and life, always kind of looking around like I never felt close to her. And trying to make sense of that if you think in the sense of um, like you said, if we choose our parents, which I believe we do, that's one of my beliefs. And it's always been hard for me to understand. And thinking about it as Carol was talking and other people were talking, I think, I've reconciled a lot of that now because I know she had difficulties and I'm sure she never intended for that to be. But I just, you're a kid and you just crave that. You want that approval and that, like somebody loves you and just, can't get enough of you. But I think maybe it taught me about that how important that is for people to have that. And so maybe, that's why I feel like with my kids, that's what I try to do is I tell them all the things that I love about them. And oh, I haven't had a sob story for a while, so sorry, you guys.
Well,
But
we know that you do send a lot of love, and whenever we're working together, I know you get all kinds of loving on me when you send me messages. I get kisses and hearts and all kinds of stuff. So I definitely feel loved by you.
oh, that's
Thank
good.
you.
And like I said, it's taken a very long time to uh, understand it because I don't want to have anger. I don't want to have, bitterness towards her. I wanted to understand her, and I feel like I understand her much better now. And I really feel like it's part of my mission to kind of put that love out there for people more so. I think that's maybe what's given me that kind of that edge of knowing how important it is to have that approval and that feeling of affection. So anyway, I I think I like every year I get a little bit more understanding of it. And my stepfather was abusive, so that did not help the situation, and I was angry at her about that. So trying to, put that all into context and because I'm such a touchy-feely person and it just I always felt so bewildered that I have all this feeling inside of me and yet none of it, my parents didn't really I never really had any manifestation of it. I
Well,
always
there's also the thought in this metaphysical choosing of
felt like
parents
I craved it and I wanted it, but I never
is that sometimes we get an agreement with this person to be part of our lesson.
right. Right. And
for
that
some
did not make
purpose
me
of their
happy at
own.
all.
Yeah. So you might just want to take some time out once in a while to close your eyes and give your mom a great virtual hug.
Oh, I talk to her all the time now.
Oh, great.
We,
Thank you.
I've reconciled quite a bit with her. It took me into my adult life, I want to say like the last 10 years even. So,
Well, Laurel, and look at all the love that you nurture your son with. I mean, you are so steadfast for him, and your presence there for him is just phenomenal. You know, you're there for him 100%, despite challenges.
well, I definitely do try to do that. But every year and some days I just understand more and more about it. Then I appreciate that.
Do you do sort of the inner child healing experiences where you go
Um,
back to young Laurel and just wrap your arms around her and tell her, "Oh my gosh, you are the most amazing person, and you will grow up to be the most loving, nurturing human being."
oh, not quite that, but was doing, like I said, every year there's a little more reflection on it. And really, Carol's topic, the way she phrased the topic, I think really caused me to kind of go kind of deep with it and try to get into that psyche. So I don't want to take up all the time, but I appreciate the little psychoanalysis for today. I appreciate you guys.
Well, inner child work could be another topic of discussion.
It certainly could.
And it's very powerful because I mean I've been doing some work on that too, and it's amazing at times. You feel like this inner child essentially dissolves into you. Suddenly it's gone, and you are this energy that comes back to you instead of being stuck in time. I mean,
Right.
it's powerful work.
Yeah, I think
Powerful
we've
and
talked about
fun.
doing it and we haven't.
Miss Arlene,
I have been thinking of late about my family heritage stuff. Every once in a while, I'll go on a binge and study stuff. I wonder like who they all were and what they all thought and how they did this and I remember stuff, and it's like little pieces of the puzzle kind of come together. And what I've been doing of late, my grandma, I was thinking about the men and women thing that I all the time, and thinking about dinner time at my family, and my mom would be sitting at one chair at the head of the table, as a matter of fact, and my dad would be over here, and they'd be arguing about stuff. And finally, somebody tells somebody to go to hell, and all hell would break loose. And it go, oh shit. And my mother would go off, and her job was to go cry because she was the woman, and that's what women did is they went and cried. And she hid in the bathroom until she was in the bathroom enough, and then she'd go to the bedroom and she'd lock the door, and there's no getting to her. And I would get mad at her about, come out of there and quit crying, come out of there and quit crying. And my dad was short. He couldn't join the military because he was only like 5'5" or 5'6" or something, and military guys had to be tall and strong, and he wasn't. He was short and mean, and he had shoulders like this, and he had hair that grew up out of his shoulders, and he always had like a shovel or a wrench or something, and he's always doing something with an attitude. And I learned that attitude. I learned that's what I learned. And I had an attitude about it. And my mother, when her last baby, my brother Randy, was born and got old enough to go to school, she went back to work. And my dad told her, no, you can't go to work. And it's like, hide and watch, And so she went and got a job, and they'd always be fussing and feuding and fighting. And I think about my grandmother. My grandmother's name was Durham. And I don't know if you know about the South and Bull Durham and Durham and the baseball Durham and the tobacco Durham and all the Durhams. My grandma had 18 babies. 18 babies that woman had. Can you imagine being pregnant for 18 years? No, no, I can't imagine what that must have been like for her. My grandma was a storyteller. She was always cool. She played the piano and the banjo, I mean, and she'd sing and tell stories. And I love grandma so much. And she'd spend time at our house and always be a bread pot sitting behind the stove because that was warm enough. She'd always be baking bread and making apple pies. And when the pie crust was left over a little piece, she'd roll it up and put some kind of fruit in there and give me a surprise little thing. And I love my grandma so much. And I remember the Bull Durham story. And there's a story about the guitar. I don't know if you know about the dobro guitar. And the dobro were the somebody brothers from, I don't know where they're from, the other side of the world. And they made the resonator that goes in the guitar. And they named their business dobro. And they made the guitar that was a dobro. And they had some big fight about something. We don't know what they were fighting about. And I always tried to find out what the dobros were fighting about. And one went one way and one went the other way. And one of them was a national guitar, changed the name from dobro to the national. And my mother had one. It was a big steel bodied guitar and she would strum it. She never learned how to play the guitar, but she would strum it. And it was great. And when she died, I inherited that guitar and I gave it to my brother Phil, and Phil plays it and still has it this day. It needed new frets and new wires. I put some strings on it. I didn't know how to do that, but I did it, and he got it with these strings that didn't last and they kept breaking and he fixed it. I don't know if he ever put new frets on it or not, but he's got a grandson that's really musical living there. And then he brought me like, this kid plays a saxophone. My brother taught him how to play the saxophone, and this kid plays the saxophone till hell and gone. He's a saxophone player, a whoop-ass saxophone player, And I love that about them all. I love my family because they were like ass kickers. My mother, you know who Rosie the Riveter was? That was my mother's job in the war, was to check the rivets on the airplanes. And I didn't see any pictures of her like Rosie the Riveter with their hair tied back, but that's what she did. And there was always, I can't imagine what that was like being Rosie the Riveter. Can you imagine what that had been like in the war? That your job is to check the rivets, because those guys got to do it right. They got to do it right. They got to pay attention. If they don't do it right, it's like, oh, we don't win this war. So that's a big job. And that's what my mom did in the war, but my dad couldn't be. So he went down to the Kaiser shipyards and he built ships, and that's what he did in the war. So these guys, that's what they did. And they fought with each other all the time. And I hated it. And somehow I'd always be in the middle of it. But at the same time, I loved them both. I was proud of them both. I remember my dad getting in fights with people, came at somebody with a shovel once, and he knocked somebody off the porch once. I'll never forget what that was like. He had him by the throat, and he said, shall I just rip his throat out or shall I let him go? And I said, oh, let him go, let him go. So my dad pushes him backwards off the porch. It's about 5 foot high porch. Pushes him backwards, and I thought that was about the coolest thing I ever saw. And so everything was about fighting and this thing, and they would fight with each other, and they'd tell each other to go to hell, and it would break my heart. At the same time, I'd be thinking, who's going to win this one, And it was like altogether weird. Thank you for listening to my story. And Bull Durham and Rosie the Riveter, and you know who else? Henry Clay. My grandpa, my grandma's husband was in the Henry Clay family, and they were slave traders. I guess you guys don't know that Henry Clay was Cassius Clay. Muhammad Ali was from the Henry Clay family.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up going to jail and doing all that stuff. And then he came back with a new name. He went to Africa and tried to find out who his relatives were and couldn't find them and all of that. So like the Cassius Clay story and Henry Clay and the Durhams and all. Oh, and my dad was from, you know who the Chisholms were? My dad's mother's name before she buried my grandpa was Chisholm from the Chisholm Trail. So, they were like cattlemen and cattle rustlers, and the most cattle in all the world were from New Mexico, and that's where they all were. So that's my family in a nutshell. I guess it's a big nut to crack. So
Well, I can see that you definitely got your grandmother's ability to still tell great stories. I
Yeah.
always love it when you go off
Yeah.
on one of those
I went
tangents.
off
Absolutely.
on
It is
that
so
one. I
much fun.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Well,
And
I guess
also your strength to fight. You saw how to do that, and you learned how to fight, and you fought a lot for people that were underdogs, and
Well,
you've
you know
always
who was
done
the
that.
underdogs? The women, the ones up there on the goddamn airplane checking the rivets. They were the ones that were working so hard and not getting any recognition and not having any power or any control. And I'm still mad about that, So I want all the power and all the control. That's why I live alone, oh well.
We love on you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Paul,
What, Paul?
um, am I on here? Yeah. Yeah, my mother was the quiet, tough one in the family. Um, my dad was the kind of a tyrant at times. And you do this and shut up and go do it. And when I get done, he'd say, well, now it's time for the next job. And it wasn't you did a good job, son. It's just not okay. Now we've got to do something else. No, I won't put my dad down completely because he taught me a lot. He's the one that encouraged me to get into the Forest Service and but my mom was the defender of us two kids. In fact, my dad used to whop me once in a while, and my mom would always be my protector, but she'd let it go too far, and she says, "Okay, that's enough, Ed. That's enough." And I finally used that as a tactic against him because when he would start whacking on me, I'd start telling him he's a son of a bitch and he's a dirty dog, and I just like I was begging for more. What I was, because when I got to a certain point, my mom would step in and say, "That's enough, Ed," and it would be over. And somehow he respected that tough love that she stood her ground and dared him to take a whack, which he never at her, which he never did. And so she was my protector, but she was also a person that could see there was something that I could do, and she didn't tell me what to do, but she trusted me when I got it something I liked. She would back me up on it and support me. She'd also fight for me. Some teacher came down with some ruling or something that she'd take me right into the teacher and me and to the superintendent's office and settle the damn thing right now. So if she could go, she could, let me take abuse to a certain extent, but she had lines that she could draw, and people were listening to her. But she was the person that I learned what love was about. She she encouraged you to do your best, let you know when you had missed the mark, encouraged you to do fun things that, for example, she got me into music. My mom loved music. She played piano. Went out and bought the first piano she bought after she got married was she traded a cow for a young heifer for the piano, and that was an old beat up thing, but boy did and then when I learned how to run the violin, we used to play together, the two of us, a duo, and just had lots of fun just by ourselves playing and jamming. And I got to give her credit for it because here my dad kind of helped me find my first 30 years or second 30 years of life in the Forest Service. But after I quit the Forest Service, one of my big projects was music, and it came from my mom. I stuck it out till like just I couldn't. Well, frankly, we ran out of audiences. All the people that liked their kind of music went and died on us, so we gave up. But I'm back to my mom. She was the one who would provide. She basically was the one that provided for the family. My dad knew how to work, but he had a delivery job and he would do projects. But my mom was the one that would save us when we were starving. And I still remember the turkey thing, going out, and after those turkeys got frozen on the vine up on their perches during the Armistice Day of 1940. There was a big snowstorm came in and just froze everything, including the turkeys on the roost. And my mom says, why don't you and your sister take your sled? I guess I can't remember if it was a sled or a wagon. I guess it's our wagon because it had melted out. And she says, go down and talk to these farmers that had lost turkeys and take them home. And she did. We canned 34 quarts of turkey
My gosh.
and put it in the larder. We had turkey for 2 or 3 years. I mean, but that's the way she would plan things, and she'd take advantage of it, and she'd cook ahead and stick it in the larder, and people would pop in, and she always had a great big meal ready for them because she knew to have stuff ready to go, and she was the one that helped decide where the priorities were on the ranch, what we should be raising and growing. And she just understood that. But the most important thing, I think, was this soft love but you could trust her for anything. She would, so I think this is the lady that shaped the last part of my life, probably more than anything. When I quit working and I had nothing else to do, I could see my mom was kind of there, even though she was dead by then. I quit drinking and got into my music and learned to be a halfway decent person on this earth.
More than halfway.
Yeah.
Because of her.
Yeah.
That's it.
Ananda.
So I think that the thing that came to my mind first was how my mom always stood up for fairness,
Yeah.
not just for herself and for her kids, but for everybody else too. She was pretty quiet and non-assertive, but when somebody was being unfair to someone else, she'd call them on it. I guess, I'm kind of an obsessive about that too, but um, I always admired that about her. She would be, if she did something that she felt in retrospect had been unjust or unfair, she would would immediately make amends. She didn't like try to avoid it, try to gloss it over, ignore it. Well, it didn't happen. Nope. She grab the bull by the horns and make amends. And I thought that was still think that's a sign of being a total person. And I have shifting a little bit. I have to take some pretty strong question to this, what I think is a little bit complacent attitude that we choose what happens to us. Who's the chooser?
You.
Who's the chooser? Who is this supposed ancient being that, guides ourself on a path to greater awareness and making good choices if it has all the wisdom to choose these events that cause us to grow? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Think about the meditation. The
I do.
meditation.
It's not, it doesn't
And
make
I
sense to 'em.
reject it. It's
Yeah.
absurd that it's schizophrenic is what it is. It's schizophrenic.
Oh,
You just fall into it.
Huh?
oh, well, it's good to have a different opinion on that, I think, Ananda, because um uh, what sent me down the rabbit hole of all this reincarnation and you know between life experiences. I mean, I've read books and books and books on this subject. It was a book back in the early 90s called Conversations with God, by some guy who's from here in the Pacific Northwest. I can't remember, Neil Donald Walsh.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was the pop spiritual guru of the day. And oh, it's a really nice concept. It's like ice cream. It's like, oh, this feels really good. I love the idea that I sit on a little planning committee before I have my life and interact with the people that I'm going to interact with in my lifetime. And we make plans to create an obstacle course for each other in this lifetime so that we can get the most out of it. And it's a really easy to digest philosophy of living. And it's always good to have somebody say, well, think about that on a different level. Think about that on a rational level. Does it really make sense? So stop and think. You're always good to bring us back to stop and think. And that's important because, yeah, we can take these little pop spirituality pills very easily.
It's just that your thinking can take you anywhere. The experience is truly the part you're here for.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter what the framework is. You're still here.
No, yes.
Still dealing with the mierda.
I think that whole thing must have come up. This is just an off the cuff thing because of the whole personal responsibility. How do you account for bad things going on? Well, this is a way you can account for it and still have the whole thing about creating your life and personal responsibility without a lot of blame.
And also
Some that it
in
is true, but it's just, yeah. Mhm.
and also under an understanding of the incomprehensible things that people do to one another. When there are times when your mind is absolutely exploding over the way people treat one another,
Right.
and especially with parents, how parents treat children who are completely innocent and unable to protect themselves, and yet they're not. Why are parents not always nurturing? And so yeah, that explains a lot of it.
I was in a group meeting once at a rehab facility. I was volunteering as somebody who would help people with, because I had just learned hypnosis and inner child work and stuff like that. And of course, I was also studying Course in Miracles. And of course, I was also studying metaphysics and the meaning and purpose of life. And so this one young man said, "So what about Jeffrey Dahmer?" I said, "Oh, crap," to myself. And I immediately went inside and said, "Okay, if everything is love, anything that's love is fear, and fear is an illusion, then I have to believe on my other part that Jeffrey chose to come to this life to teach us how to have love."
To by his example of what we don't want to do.
And could be an example of what my mom always said. She was an example of what not to do. But but if the things I said, if this is true, if this is true, then this has to be. And that's one of those logical things I was working with. And I said, so the only thing I can think of that would make any sense to me was that he agreed to be here and be this horrible person that we could learn how to experience love.
I think we're here
Because
to be spiritual Houdinis.
spiritual. Well, we certainly do have a lot of questions about why we're here.
Yeah, and once you think you have the answer, then all of a sudden you realize that maybe that's not the answer after all.
And what was the reason for that? And what was the reason for that? And what was the reason for that? And then you could just, like you say, go into the rabbit hole and say, "I give up. I'm going to do the laundry."
I'm gonna bake cookies.
It sounds better than laundry.
I forget which Buddhist monk said that, but he said if your something about if your spiritual belief, no, that was a different one. If your spiritual belief allows you to think badly of others, then you need a new spiritual belief. But one of them also said, after all of this thinking and wondering, you still have to do the laundry. So.
Carry water, and chop wood.
Yeah,
Carry
chop
water
wood,
and
carry
chop wood.
water. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been great today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Carol.
Carol, for the topic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. This has been very, I think, therapeutic as well as insightful and
Yeah.
thought-provoking, and a great discussion.
Oh, one thing I did forget to tell you, I was a stepmother for a little while because I chose not to have children after my aunt told me how awful they were and how you couldn't have nice things or have fun. but I did run into a child who was like someone here talked about in prison or in jail or in detention. And I knew him and his family, and I knew what his family life was like. And he was getting ready to run away from home, and he was like 15 years old, and he was going to go to Los Angeles. And he stopped by my house on the way out. And I said, well, you could go to Los Angeles, but in the old days, you could actually get a job and be okay. But these days, kids can't get jobs. The law won't let them have. You'll probably end up selling your body. If that's something you really want to do, I won't stop you, but I'd like to give you another choice. And so I talked to his social worker, and I said, I'd like to give him the choice of staying with me and me taking care of him for a while. But I want him to have that choice. So I don't want you to send the the cops after him. I want him to have that choice. And she said, fine. And so he chose to stay with me.
How long did he stay with you, Carol?
Well, we had some problems.
Well, because he was a troubled kid. Yeah.
He was a troubled kid, yeah. And one day I went to get my power saw and it was gone. And I asked him where it was, and he said, oh, I sold it to a friend so I could get some drugs. And I said, you can sell your stuff. I don't care, but you can't sell my stuff because you've stolen lifetime out of my life now. I have to spend that time again on a job making the money so I can buy another power saw.
What did he say? Anything?
Nope, he didn't say anything. I didn't really expect him to say anything. I just wanted to plant a seed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
nice.
another time he kicked the windows. He and a friend were messing around and kicked the windows out of the living room that goes to the porch. And as I drove up to get out of the car, he said, you're not going to like what happened and you're going to be really mad. And I said, oh, good. Let's see what it is. And he said, well, we kicked the window out. We were messing around. And he said, I'm sorry. And I said, yeah, that's, what are you going to do about it? He said, what? I said, well, what are you going to do about it? He said, well, aren't you going to scream and hit me? And I said, well, darn, I never tried that to fix a window. I guess I could, but I'd really rather have you do something about it.
Figure out how to fix it.
I said, so what you do is you get a hold of the people in town, because we were living in a little bit of the country, and find people that fix windows. And then ask them how much it's going to cost to fix with a window. And you might want to ask 2 or 3 people because some might be cheaper than other people. And you choose the person and make sure they do a good job.
I think parenting is a lot about planting seeds.
And so I said, and I'll take $10 a week out of your, or a month out of yours, because I gave him an allowance. If that's okay with you to pay you back. And he said, because I had to give him the choice to that too. Because I want him to know that choices had consequences. Some are good, some are bad. You celebrate the good ones and you learn from the bad ones.
So how long did he stay with you?
He stayed with me until the bank called me one day about a year later saying, Bobby is here and he's got a check written by you with his handwriting for $100. And I realized that I wasn't making really good headway with Bobby. And so I called Mrs. Drazovich and I said, I was crying because I knew I had to give up. And boy, I hate giving up. And so I was crying and I was telling her, I said, I don't know how to help him. And he's now done something that qualifies as criminal and I don't know what to do. I can't let it go. And she said, no, of course you can't. She said, shall I have him picked up? And I said, yes.
Mm.
And so they took him off to jail and I went to see him and he said, well, are you going to get me out of here? I said, no. I said, that was another decision you made that was wrong. And I'm sorry about that, but I can't because now I really can't trust you. I would love to be able to trust you, but I can't. And so
You know how he's doing now?
I have no idea. And I cried off and on for weeks after that.
Oh.
And Mrs. Drazovich said, just remember, Carol, you've planted a lot of seeds. It'll be up to him to do things.
Exactly.
You gave him that amount of time that, even a year, gave him a year to grow up that much more before he did go off in the world on his own. And that was a precious year for that kid.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. It was a relief from wherever he was before, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Yeah, his mother had all kinds of kids and she sold some of them for money for the family. So it was a weird life for him. And then, of course, many of her significant others were abusive.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Well, you did what you could do.
Yeah. So I did a mother thing, guys, even though I wasn't a mother.
Modeling and teaching. Mhm. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Been great. And I think next week we have Reverend Diane Green Tree
Next-
Wood.
In 2 weeks.
Oh, in 2 weeks. Yes.
Mhm.
Next meeting, which is in 2 weeks. Yes. But let's wrap this one up with our closing song, You Are the Face of God by Karen Drucker. So unmute yourself if you like and greet each other with namaste.
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 Namaste. Namaste. Namaste. Namaste.
No.
Namaste.
Yeah, that pretty much fits with You Are the Face of God.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, prior to closing, I'll just mention that our community is supported by the gifts of the community through service and finances. And if you'd like to make a financial gift, you can mail it to the church or do it online at the website, and an email comes out periodically with that information. And anybody watching this that doesn't know our website, it's my-alc.com. And thank you, everybody, for being here and making this community what it is.